The fires, Star Trek, horses, and Will Rogers. Today on Trekland Tuesdays Live, number 384, with me, Dr. Trek, Larry Nemecek, coming at you here from the heart of Trekland, here via Portal 47, and yes, Trekland Treks, your own customized away mission to real Star Trek locations, not sound stages, but the outdoor locations. Co-planned and concierge-led by yours truly. Get in touch with me at larrynemecek.com or treklandtreks.com. So yes, welcome back for another Tuesday here of some clarity, sanity, and the big picture in so many things Star Trek. It has been a week. You know, it was only a week ago I was talking about, dawned on me that I had been a fan, Star Trek fan, for 50 years, sometime last spring, no exact date. And we also talked about looking forward to 2025. And hey, if you're watching us later on YouTube, that's awesome. Make sure you can leave a comment and keep the conversation going, okay? It's good to see everybody. It's good to know that we're connected, right? We've been through, feels like so much. The early fans were getting through Vietnam and the draft and the early ecology movement, and then civil rights and women's rights and gay rights and fighting AIDS, and just so much up and up and up. We've had economic crashes and all that, and ups and downs. And it's been a week here. I can't believe it's been a week since I had a happy dappy looking forward to 2025, and I still am. But for all of you who are on my Instagram channel, or maybe not, I did go on live a week ago tomorrow, Wednesday night, and talk about the LA fires, and in particular, the first 24 hours of the fires, when the winds were like at 80 miles an hour, which is hurricane force winds, only instead of water, it was fire, and there was no way. And that's why you hear about the Palisades, the beautiful Palisades area on the coast and inland, being wiped out. And that is why I have been gut punched and staggered with my fellow foundation board members and docents and the entire community. People with homes that have been lost. You've been hearing about it all week. And the Eaton fire over by Pasadena and Altadena. And some other smaller fires that have cropped up and have been more or less roped in. But the Palisades fire and losing my other passion in life, well, this guy, Will Rogers. But here in California, I call them Will East and Will West. So Will's birthplace is in Claremore. I'm a native Okie, and so was Will. And we both came to California, drawn by new media and looking for bigger and better things than we could do back home. And we had Will's West, apart from the Oklahoma base of his birth and all the monuments and things there, birthplace and all that, his adult home, where he actually lived during his LA years and built his ranch and wonderful visiting place he hosted people so often, parties and everything. The ranch house, the stables were lost in the Palisades fire. And I'm sure you've seen some of that. But, you know, I'm going to switch back and forth today. I'm going to be a little selfish, but also talk more broadly. And I do that. There's a weird kind of guilt where everybody, so many people with their own homes, and then people with businesses. And there are schools and churches that were lost in the Palisades and over at Altadena and some of the other fires as well. It's hard to get your mind wrapped around this. I'm going to say a couple of things right off the bat. There's no corruption going on here. There's no budget cutting. The people jumping in to try to make something out of all this misery and tragedy. This was unprecedented. This was biblical. They're throwing all the adjectives at it. This was global warming stuff. You know, the hurricanes are bigger. The winds are bigger. The water's hotter in the Gulf. The tornadoes are bigger. I wasn't there, but I know firsthand what that felt like to see them add a whole new classification at the top of the EF scale for tornadoes back in 99 through central Oklahoma, ending up in Moore, ending up a half mile from where Janet and I first lived when we were first married. Everything is more and more and more. And it didn't matter if there'd been a few million or a few hundred more firefighters or better water pressure. When you've got, just imagine a hurricane with wind. They'd love to talk about sharknadoes. Well, imagine a fire-nado for hours. And that's That's what happened Wednesday night, with winds so high that the water scoopers, the helicopters, the planes, not all of them are on site. Thank you, Canada, for sending those down. Thank you, 1,500 Mexican I think 1,500 Mexican firefighters. All the states in mutual aid got here, but that first 24 hours was horrendous, and that's what got Wills, and that's what got so much of the Palisades. 80-mile-an-hour winds where none of the aircraft could get to the air and help, especially after dark. Thing about the water pressure, the LA grid is made for fighting individual house fires. It's nobody's thinking you're on a grass fire level. I remember wildfires. We had those back home. I covered them running around in the county outside of Norman. And yeah, we had an arsonist then. The Banner Road Bandit set several fires near the house I grew up in, where my dad still lived back then. They're coming to see that probably, maybe even the Palisades fire was saying human cause, whether it was specifically arson or somebody's campfire got away. That's a ways away. But the bottom line here is the water grid. Nobody envisioned fighting firestorms in the middle of town. Around the edges, yeah. Being able to use the water scoopers, yeah. It was just, what I'm trying to say here is all these people pointing fingers about planning. And if there was the infrastructure's fault, it was infrastructure laid down 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago. It took the Northridge quake to realize how much engineering could be done with retrofitting buildings against earthquake. That's where we are. Right now, there's so many people in pain and hurting. The Getty Villa, I'm so thankful, was saved. Greek and Roman sculpture, statues, art there on the coast. I don't know how they did it, but that's great. We didn't have a multi-million-dollar. We had sprinklers at the ranch, and I'll talk about that first. But this is a Star Trek show, and a lot of you, I'd like to think a lot of you watching my channels heard about Wills. A lot of you heard a lot about some of the Star Trek reactions. First off, I guess I should say thank you to everybody who's checked in on us personally. Since we moved last year, we're 50 miles away. But I swear I've heard from text and messaging and everything from I think people from every phase of my life, people I haven't talked to in 10 and 20 and 30 years, both about the LA fires and when they heard Will Rogers lost and they thought of me. A lot of folks back home from all phases of my life. It's been great to hear from them. It's been kind of a silver lining in a way, in a very otherwise, dark, dirty, noxious cloud. Silver lining in in an ugly cloud here with the greater LA fires. So we're fine, just so everybody knows. And yes, there's been a lot of impact of the fires on on thousands of people, and a lot of them overlap Trekland. And you may have noticed, if you've been watching your socials, David Goodman, the writer who joined the Enterprise crew for a while and then went on to, American Dad for years with Seth MacFarlane, and then went over to the Orville and has been writing on the Orville. And also, I want to say immediate past president of the Writers Guild that got them through the agents' big reform movement, an agency fees reform movement that helped the writers against their own agents, and was immediate past president during the strikes. David lost his pretty home he's had for, I think he said 28 years. A lot of you may have noticed that, of course, Denise Crosby lost her home in the Palisades, and she's been out there, and I think she's going through therapy, channeling what that recovery's been like. And then a lot of folks that have high profiles have been talking about some of the greater Star Trek creative family, the folks that hopefully someday we'll get on Portal 47, the backstage folks. Tara Metalis was trying to point up a GoFundMe for one of the editors on Picard, Justin Block, and his family. Tawny Newsome was pointing up a new writer on everybody's new on Academy. We haven't seen their work yet, but one of the writers on Academy, L'Oreal Mather, who had credits on other shows before Academy. Apparently William Eliscu, who was the art director for Picard on season 2 and 3, or an art director, lost. There's probably more. My new attorney that I just had to commission for a couple of things just in the last couple of months was right in the Palisades, ironically, and he lost his home and business. He said he had everything backed up. Everything of his business law firm was backed up on digital, thank God, because it's just incredible to think. You think around the edges, But the beachfront homes, the mountaintops, yeah, maybe, but the in-town parts, and make no mistake, not all movie star homes. Lots of flatland, legacy homes through families, blue-collar workers all over LA, much less right there in the Palisades. So people have really expensive dirt, and they're trying to rebuild homes. I hope most of them are, and I hope somehow the character of the Palisades can be maintained, the laid-back little nature. And whatever gentrification and people swooping in to take advantage, I hope people are smart enough to jump on that, especially after watching what happened to Lanai, Hanahei in Hawaii, the coastal town, little old coastal town that got wiped out and is trying to resist plans to be all shiny new where nobody can afford to live there anymore. You've also seen some other effects. Trek Talks 4, the all-day telethon started by John Billingsley and Hollywood Food Coalition to benefit that group and all of its arms that reach across the country, actually. And now Bonnie Gordon co-hosts it. It was going to be a day long of panels. I had a panel. Wonderful. I'll hold off talking about it. You've seen a lot of the guests announced. They made the decision. It was supposed to be this Saturday, but so many of the guests of the Trek folks are affected just with the chaos. And they've postponed that till sometime in April. I haven't seen a confirmed day, but they're saying April for that. So Trek Talks 4 in April. Now we, meaning moi, have delayed the season opening of the Trek Files. I know I've been saying a week and then a week. We're shooting for next Monday, but it might even be delayed past that. So just hang with us. We'll make sure and let you know, because we have some new shiny stuff around the edges of the Trek Files for this season. Lucky season 13. We'll make sure and share that as soon as we can. But these are all ripple effects. Now, Star Trek San Francisco, Creation's first cycle back around to the regional shows that it's going to keep again, is still on track for a week from this weekend in actually Burlingame, out by the San Francisco airport. And I'm going to be there. It's the only one of the regionals that I get to. It'll be good to see all the live fans and folks that are there. You know, it'll be good to get out. But everybody, make no mistake, the shock here is the headline of the fire losses, the rebuilding, the insurance wrangling and hassling and hoping nobody gets screwed by insurance, because we've seen that in Florida and California. Rebuilding and getting enough of a settlement to be able to put their house up on their very expensive dirt that they have now. Just praying that everybody's able to rebuild in some way, some fashion, that the overall character somehow can be maintained and retained. But that's all down the line. It's going to be a long haul. And one thing I've seen people complaining on the border of politicizing this or just feeling hurt, people saying, why should anything be done for the Palisades victim when all the flood victims in Western North Carolina haven't been fully addressed yet? Well, they shouldn't. Everybody should be helped. Everything should be brought to fruition. Well, as Will once said, this is the United States of America. This is the greatest country in the world, and we have the resources to do that. Nobody should be it shouldn't be a contest between ravaged areas of the country and natural disasters, except for somebody to notice that the natural disasters are getting more frequent and reinventing scales of whatever the disaster is. So one thing that's going on right now, and shout out and kudos, is if you're not aware of them, there's a Facebook group called the Trek Family. Mark Sickle was the founder of that, and it was a great networking. He's along a little bit of a parallel where they're trying to highlight a lot of the folks that work on Star Trek as well, the greater family, and especially at the studios. And they've started a GoFundMe to help some of the folks I just was listing. Probably many more by now that we don't know, across all the eras. It was fascinating to me. There's an historically African-American Black community in Altadena that people are concerned about being able to rebuild. Oh, this is over by Pasadena. Thank God it didn't come over any closer to the Rose Bowl or JPL. That was the first night. That was a huge concern, aside from all the other concerns. And I just want to say real fast, the winds have not died down. There are still some hotspot worry areas. If something gets away with you can't control the wind. That's why I want to tell all these politicians, it's like, yeah, you get in there and fight with 80-mile-an-hour winds and then try to find somebody to blame for the high winds until we figure out the next wave of how do you retrofit for wind and fire the way they eventually have been doing for earthquakes the last 30 years. We keep learning, keep getting better at it, try to learn from the losses. But I'm just saying, Trek Family is doing this as a GoFundMe. You'll see some folks jumping in with their individual ones. They're highlighting those. But if you go to the Trek Family's pages, there's links. You can get in and give money. Because that's one thing. People are sitting around the country. I'd like to think only a certain segment is either smirking about. There's blue collar people that may lose their they're making $80,000 a year. They're barely, the only reason they can live in their $1 million homes is because it was their parents or their grandparents, and real estate values went crazy. And they may be grandfathered in on property taxes by Prop 13, which came in the late 70s. Otherwise, the movie stars grab the attention, but that's 5% of the Palisades. That's crazy. Some of the stuff you just have to bat it down. So that's the thing. If you're sitting at home and helpless and you want to do something and you want to target your community, because that's what's going to happen. And just like the folks in North Carolina, I'm concerned that there will be attention fatigue and will pass on. And so the people who are tightest in communities are going to be the ones most focused. So as the world at large moves on, because don't know if you've noticed or not, but there's suddenly about to start being a whole lot of crazy headlines spewing almost daily. It will take attention away after the inauguration, and it'll take attention away from these folks in recovery. And yeah, the folks in North Carolina don't deserve to be forgotten about. Nobody deserves to be after a thing. The people in Flint, Michigan dealt with being a huge headline and then still taking years to get their pipes fixed and their water system mess cleaned up that appointed bureaucrat screwed up in the first place. So we'll keep our eye on that. With the Trek community helping our Trek folks, we'll be there. And that's one thing about having these community focused helps, and you're seeing those pop up. So if you're in some other community, artists, different ethnic groups, it's just going to be all over the map. And they're going to be with us for a long time. You're going to see individual GoFundMes. It's just a thing. I mean, the first wave has been awesome. There's been so many Los Angeles area. There's donation centers just to get clothing. People are clearing out if you don't know, people are clearing out their closets, their homes to find decent clothing of all kinds. And there was one at the Rose Bowl. There was one at the Pasadena Convention Center, just for the Altadena side of things, which I knew better. The one at the Santa Anita racetrack. And within 3 or 4 days, they were turning people away. They had so many clothes of all kinds to process, kids, adults, all that. On the west side, I know there are a couple not so familiar, but they're out there. And a lot of people, Kate Mulgrew, talk about Trek people, was posting places to go and do stuff. A lot of people are doing what they can to help from wherever they are in the country. And so that is why I hope you let me take a point of personal privilege and talk about my other community, Will's community, because losing the ranch house and the stables is a horrific historical, cultural loss. Emotional, but also just historical and cultural. 2 things. We had a community of docents and our paid park staff, maintenance, interpretation, curators, and we had our foundation board. And we had vendors, including our biggest vendor, who was Jigsaw Farms, Cha-Cha, whose basically office was the horses that she rented and then was allowed to give riding lessons in the corral and stables. So we've lost our historic structures, most of them. There are a few outbuildings that somehow survived. But Jigsaw Farms, our horse vendor, has lost the home for 10 horses and their home where their home was, burned out of work and home, like so many in the Palisades. And 4 employees, just so you know. So I'm doing what I can on my channels to pass along what you can do there, okay? First of all, in the spirit of Will, and I'm saying this because 2 days after the fires, our foundation board of directors, of which I've been privileged to be, I've been a 22-year docent at the park, been on the board since the end of the pandemic, and they made me president 2 years ago. Although I'm kind of the rookie in many ways as far as what they're doing. But we met, Zoomed, getting the bulletins from the state parks people who are assessing the site, the 4 pickup loads full of art and artifacts that they were able to get out, but nothing large. The 20s and 30s Monterey Mission furniture, so many quirky things about Will's personal effects. We don't know yet. They've already been accessioned, stored. They're getting into storage. A lot of the Charles Russell paintings and bronzes, a lot of the Ed Barine paintings and etchings. It's those things, but that's the high end value. We have a lot more besides that. I hope a lot of the housewares and kitchen artifacts from the 20s and 30s and personal quirky things of Will's and the families made it. We just don't know yet. That's part of the wondering. Just like so many people have not been able to get back to their homes in the Palisades. But what we decided to do, because big decisions about the park itself and how we would keep interpretation going there, so that Will's home place, which was the reason for the season of the dedication, it wasn't dedicated for hiking trails. It was dedicated as a monument and legacy to Will. What in future interpretation, what looks like. So it's not just a glorified name on a glorified hiking trail. That's all months in the future between state parks and the foundation as a partner and the community. We decided to focus right now on our people, on our vendors and our volunteers and our park staff that have been burned out and lost everything. So it's not a GoFundMe. It's a direct access to the foundation, and we'll announce what we got, and we've already got our list of several people that we're going to try to help with this money of our employees. And at the same time, if you have anything left over, if you want to help out with Jigsaw Farms, I just saw on their page they got a huge they got like 4 days worth of feed from a local feed company as a help. This is supporting Cha Cha and Jigsaw Farms and the 10 horses who were all evacuated in that 2-hour window. They had to evacuate and clear out the house as much as they could up until the time the ranger and the firefighter were ordering everybody to leave. It was just who was there on site and who they could grab. There were 10 bodies helping, trying to throw things into pickups. I mean, they were loading up the high-end things, but I would have and at the end they were grabbing stuff and throwing it in personal cars. So barely had 2 hours to evacuate this. I should say, too, that to quantify things a little bit, so far we know that 3 of our docents, our volunteers, lost their homes. Our chief interpreter, who gives so much, is kind of like my working partner when we do high-end events. Our chief interpreter lost his home right there in the heart of Palisades. And one of our board members and co-founders of the foundation, whose grandfather was Will and Betty's ranch manager, they built their little home when they moved in as young folks in 1933. And one of our board members, their granddaughter, has lived in it for the last 20 years. And aside from it being her home, it was historic on its own. A little cottage bungalow about a mile from the park on the west side. And she lost that. And as I said, our horse vendor lost her home. So that's just what we have compiled so far. And there may be more. I can't imagine more of our docents and some of our other staff that work in maintenance, in outdoors, landscaping. Some more of them aren't burned out as well. Anyway, those are the 2 links, if you will indulge me, everybody. And here's the thing. I'm mentioning my Will Rogers life here on my Star Trek show. It struck me years ago, and it took Terry Rio writing DeForest Kelley's biography, Dr. McCoy, to say, and she was a denizen, she was a horse person, and she came and rode at the park. And she said, I get it why you're such a Trek fan, and I get it why you're a fan of D. Kelley and Dr. McCoy. And I'm like, and Will, I see the connection there. And I never thought about it. After she mentioned it, I got it. I got it. And it's not just that, like Dee had that horse DNA with him doing all those Westerns and riding and all that. He learned to ride. But it was the philosophy. And it's made me think Will channeled, I don't know, but between his generosity of spirit, coming from a cultural background. Yeah, he grew up in the Indian Nation on a ranch, but he was part Cherokee. He grew up with the black kids, former slaves, former freedmen after the Civil War who were working the ranch. Dan Walker and his wife Sarah were both trick ropers and were showing the kids rope tricks stuck with Will, and that's what got him into show business, was his roping, like a magician, only a trick roper, back in the day before TV and radio and movies. Live events were a big deal in the vaudeville variety shows. That's how Will got his start before he wound up being the number one personality and king of all media in the world. And everything he said and did, so much of it is so relevant still to our times, it's scary. That's why we keep his memory alive and why we interpret him. And it's just sad because we're about to celebrate the centennial of the house. He started working on it in 1925, 26. We're coming up on the centennial of the Will Rogers Highway, Route 66. So they nicknamed it for Will, and it ends at Santa Monica, just down from the park. We will be still part of that centennial, but we had our own centennial. We just celebrated the 80th anniversary of widow Betty Rogers on her deathbed deeding the park to the state to bank the state park. We just had the 80th anniversary party last summer. It's just such an ironic time for all this to be happening. But I want to say this because, yeah, if you're a Will Rogers fan, I think you ought to be a Trek fan and vice versa. It's just, he plunged in, I think, you couldn't have celebrities until you had mass media to have the entire country, much less the world, know who somebody was. Before that, what, politicians and kings? You were just starting to have the point where, like, opera singers, right? People had renown in the 1880s and 90s. Mark Twain, Florence Nightingale, some of the opera. You were just starting to have it, if they weren't kings and presidents, the public to know. And it took mass media. Well, guess who was there when mass media was being invented? And was So even in the 19-teens and 20s, celebrity benefits for disaster victims was a completely unknown, new thing. And Will was doing that, kind of inventing that, as well as the nightly monologue and so many other things. He was on the cutting edge of tech. He supported all the early air flyers. He was there. He wanted the latest hot thing. He was trying to get every town to build airfields. He was pushing for an air force in America while the Army and the Navy fought over who would have it. He was watching the rest of the world develop. He said before the next war, we'd better learn to fly, we'd better learn to dig. So he was very much, even though he grew up on a horse on a farm in Indian Territory in the Cherokee Nation, he was very much a futurist, looking for the cutting edge tech. I said forever he would have been the first guy on his block to have a 300 baud dial-up modem in the 80s if he'd lived that long. Faster, better, the future was Will. I totally get the spirit of Will is the spirit of Gene and Star, a rustic version of some of the same philosophy. Diversity, equality, fairness, calling things out when they need to be called out. It's the same vibe. So I'm going to indulge here. And you know what? Even Will said one time we were getting involved way before Vietnam, in places maybe we shouldn't have been, in the 30s, when there was an uproar in China, and we had all the major powers had Navy ships looking out for their interests. Will said something about, hey, what would we feel like if the Chinese sent their gunboats up the Mississippi and said they were just protecting their laundries in Memphis? He said, look, when you get in trouble 5,000 miles from home, you got to been looking for it. It sounds like Will kind of had a handle on the prime directive right there. Look, I could go on with some more Willisms. I think you get my point. So it's my show. But again, thank you for indulging me with these two requests. If you're sitting there anywhere in the world and wanting to help, I know there are, just in the last week, the GoFundMes and the calls for help have been multiplying. They should. I wish we had a better system. I know there'll be government help. I know the state of California is talking about $2.5 billion to help itself. I know help is going to come from all kinds of private sources, foundations. There's one that's already working with us and other places in the Palisades to do that. Just started. Things are going to happen. I just hope and pray that we can get the area back. Same thing with all the burn areas. It's going to be humongous. Nobody deserves to be left out. That does include Western North Carolina in the mountains. Same kind of oddball circumstances to cause you to think nothing like this is ever going to happen. But tiny hollows up in the mountains with a flood, urban areas with a fire. Well, welcome to your 2020s. Let's find the real cause and do something about it. Okay. Meanwhile, these are all cases that are going to deserve to be stayed with. A lot of people are going to be hurting. A lot of people overlapping our communities. Yes, just in our space here, let's look out for our Trek folks and indulge me a little bit. And I'm sharing this with all the folks in and out of fandom back home in Oklahoma too, because people in Oklahoma have been following the Will tragedy. You know, it's one of 100 tragedies here in California with all the fires and individual people and losses. One of the higher profile properties. Aside from all, I mean, there's a little bit of guilt here where people don't want to feel bad about their own case because they look around, they see so many other hundreds and thousands of folks just like them. And that's true. It's just that those people are hoping to rebuild. They can't regain their personal life mementos and family memories. That is true. The structures, though, are worth rebuilding and restarting their lives. Our structure lost was a structure, but it was historic. Do you rebuild exactly to the original plan and say this is I mean, what if Mount Vernon burned down? See what I mean? That long debate about what to do when the Twin Towers went down, and that wasn't anybody's. That was more a symbol than anything. Anyway, that's going to be a long discussion months away. Right now, we've got people. I appreciate it if you would jump in the links, and I'll have them again. The links to help our Will Rogers community as we look to our own and try to support them. They've supported the park so many years. I'm so glad we've got the place so well documented. We'll see what happens. Hopefully we'll have some kind of interpretation there, but right now it's the people first, and you've also got the folks who are horse-minded helping Jigsaw Farms and Cha-Cha's as well. I'm going to end it there, gang. Hopefully I will see a chunk of folks at San Francisco in a little over a week. In a month, I'll be on the cruise, which is, I mean, this year started out so gung-ho. We'll have some little news around the Trek Files when we get to premiere and debut. Hopefully in the next week, we'll have this all nailed down to be able to announce. And some really, really, really cool news here. I don't know when we get to announce it, but it's taken up a lot of time right now. The year was starting off so great. And then this. So we will recoup and rebuild and know that so many others are doing the same thing in more than one part of the country as they are around the world. So I really appreciate everybody being with us. Hello, 2025. Really appreciate you guys here on Tuesday. I appreciate you sharing. The Will Rogers Ranch Foundation has a post on our Facebook page. We also have it on our Instagram. Those are our two main social channels. Appreciate all the sharing you can do, or even just replaying the link to our webpage that I gave you there. And at some point down the line, we'll be talking more long-term about what the interpretive nature of the park is going to be, because that place deserves to be way more than just at some point this guy lived here. There's a name on a sign, and I love the views and the hiking. We're going to have far more than that. You can do that anywhere. What was special about that ground? That's going to do it, gang. Thank you so much for indulging me today, letting me take a moment of personal privilege. I have so many people to thank. I have the list here for the new year. Thank you, all of my Patreon folks, for helping us, adding on to what we're doing here. So yeah, thank you for our TTL Club, Chuck A., James Kerwin, Diana Hopkins, Halbeard Gun Johnson, Lawrence Todd, Justin Weir, Mitch Keith, Andrew Jazimski, Josh Patton, Pranakasha Productions, Chris Jiggins, Keith Rombach, and Comedy Forecast. And our live wires next here up, Jesse at Crusher Convo. Yep, Greg Wickstrom, Robert McLean, Byron Bailey, J.R. Poole, Gary Williams, James Durovich, Dave Gregory, Dan Leckie, and Casey Shafsky. Thanks so much, everybody. And if you want to jump in on my humble little Patreon, $5 and $10 a month, patreon.com/TreklandLive. It's just the shout out and the $10, guys, as soon as I get things down. One thing, we've got the wall. We're painting the wall on the good side. On the archival shelf side, hopefully in the next few days I can get that finished and I can finally move in the rest of my office over here. I know it's crazy, right? So as you heard me say, the Trek Files, our aim is to be premiering next Monday. They might still have to be held off another week, but when we do, it'll be awesome. Our new season, and we will have some news that I want everybody to hear about. Some good news there as well. So if you're leaving us now, please check me out on all the socials, Twitter and Blue Sky. Notice I still call it Twitter. Also, our YouTube, like and subscribe if you haven't yet. Also, Instagram and Facebook is Larry's Trekland. Yeah. Portal47.net is your backstage pass to all things Trek. It is your mini-con all year long concerning the Star Trek creatives, all your favorite starships and sound stages. Hope you'll join us so that the Portales have a great time. And it's a great community, especially when we have our also, besides our guests, the roundtables, things from my archives experience. And I love sharing that. So thanks, everybody. Thanks again for being on. If you're leaving us right now, watching later on YouTube, hey, take it easy out there. Stay healthy. Do all the things. Stay woke. Check the sources. A lot of fake shit out there. And Trek well, everybody.